Over the winter, Putin and his inner circle believed they had found the formula to break Ukraine. The plan was straightforward: systematically destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure using coordinated drone and missile strikes, leaving the Ukrainian population in freezing darkness. What Russia apparently failed to account for was that Ukraine would not absorb these attacks without responding. The crossing of a critical threshold came when Kyiv was struck hard in January, and Ukraine's answer arrived on the night of January 25th. It was decisive. Russia's escalating strike campaign. In the weeks leading up to that response, Russian airstrikes had been intensifying steadily. A January 9th assault on Ukraine's energy grid set the tone, and the Kremlin made its intentions explicit. As missiles and drones continued to fly, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov articulated the strategy openly, asserting that conditions were worsening daily for the Ukrainian government and that the window for decision-making in Kyiv was shrinking. The message was unmistakable. Russia would continue targeting the energy grid until Ukraine came to the negotiating table. January 20th brought another massive strike, described by the New Voice of Ukraine as one of Russia's largest of the war. Ballistic missiles hit Kyiv directly, sending enormous explosions rolling through the city. Fires broke out, and both water and electricity supplies on Kyiv's left bank were disrupted. When the full inventory of that night's strike was tallied, Ukraine counted 18 ballistic missiles, 15 cruise missiles, 1 Zircon missile, and 339 attack drones. A significant assault. Though, as viewers of our coverage will know, Ukraine's air defenses managed to neutralize the majority of incoming projectiles. Some damage was done, but the potential destruction was substantially reduced. That didn't prevent another attack from following just days later. On January 24th, mere hours after Ukrainian, Russian, and American diplomats had sat down together in Abu Dhabi to explore ceasefire possibilities, Russia launched yet another wave of missiles and drones at Ukraine. As sirens activated across the country and explosions again struck Kyiv, a European diplomat summarized Moscow's approach bluntly, describing it as a message written in fire. This is Putin's negotiating style, not dialogue or good faith engagement, but relentless violence designed to wear down the opposition. The human cost in Kyiv. The cumulative effect on Kyiv's population was severe. As the Kyiv Post reported on January 25th, more than 800,000 residents were left without reliable electricity. The January 24th strike alone severed heating to 6,000 buildings and cut power to 88,000 households. Emergency and repair crews were working around the clock each night, attempting to restore services wherever possible. Part of what makes Russia's winter energy strategy so effective in Kyiv relates, ironically, to Soviet-era urban planning. The BBC notes that the widespread use of apartment buildings dependent on communal central heating, a distinctly Soviet architectural legacy, creates a significant vulnerability. In this system, water is heated at a centralized facility and then pumped into the radiators of thousands of homes across the city. Striking the plants that generate this heat is an efficient way to strip warmth from large numbers of people simultaneously. Generators and battery backups can compensate for electricity cuts to some degree, but damaged or destroyed heating plants are a far more difficult problem to solve. Putin's objective, then, is fear. The strikes on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities over those 2 weeks served no battlefield military purpose. The people losing access to heat and power are not soldiers. They are elderly residents, children, and civilians with no role in the fighting whatsoever. All of it is designed to pressure Ukraine toward negotiations where Russia intends to present demands that no sovereign nation could reasonably accept. And yet, as has repeatedly been the case since February 2022, Putin has miscalculated the Ukrainian people's resilience. Valentina Verteletska, a deputy director interviewed by The Guardian on January 13th, described the situation clearly. The Russians want to break Ukrainians, to make them angry and miserable enough to take to the streets in protest. That, she said, will not happen. Zelensky had issued a direct warning back in September, anticipating exactly this kind of Russian escalation. He stated plainly that if Russia threatened a blackout in Ukraine's capital, there would be a blackout in Russia's capital too. He followed that with a reminder that civilized countries do not strike first, but that restraint should never be mistaken for weakness. Russia's escalation and financial recklessness. Russia appeared uninterested in heeding those warnings. Reuters reported that the January 20th strike included targeting of substations critical to nuclear safety, a significant and alarming escalation. That same attack involved munitions collectively valued at approximately $131 million. For context, Russia is currently operating with a $70 billion budget deficit, according to Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence. Spending over $130 million on a single strike under those conditions is not strategic calculation. It is recklessness. Ukraine's response: Belgorod. A day after the January 24th attack, Ukraine responded. The target was the Belgorod region, one of Russia's oblasts that shares a direct border with Ukraine and has functioned as a key staging and logistics hub for Russian ground and aerial operations since the invasion began in February 2022. At that time, Kremlin planners would not have considered Belgorod at risk. Ukraine, they assumed, would be defeated before it could ever bring the consequences of Putin's war back to Russian soil. 4 years on, that assumption has been thoroughly dismantled. On January 25th, Ukraine executed what Belgorod authorities themselves described as the most massive aerial strike the region and its capital city have experienced since the war began. In what the Kiev Post characterized as a tit-for-tat energy strike, Ukraine appears to have deployed HIMARS weapon systems to carry out a sequence of at least 50 explosions across the area, leaving significant portions of Belgorod without electricity or water. The primary target was the Belgorod thermal power plant, located on Pivnichno-Donetska Street, according to Militarny. The facility was struck multiple times. Russian air defenses were unable to intercept the attack. The significance of this target is considerable. The Belgorod TPP is responsible for supplying thermal energy to the city's central and northern districts, accounting for more than 36% of Belgorod's total heating capacity. Approximately 115,000 people were put at risk of losing access to heat as a result. Russian attempts to downplay the damage collapsed almost immediately. Pro-Russian telegram channels, including Astra, began circulating footage almost as soon as the attack concluded. Astra's commentary confirmed multiple strikes on the Belgorod TPP, power outages across several districts affecting both electricity and water, and a minimum of 50 explosions documented by local community groups, describing it as one of the most powerful attacks on the city to date. Video evidence emerged quickly, footage showing missile debris being examined by what appeared to be Russian security personnel, recordings capturing the sound of successive explosions as car alarms activated across the city, and a striking visual of a large aerial flash consistent with a HIMARS missile striking the TPP directly. Belgorod, governor's response. Faced with undeniable evidence, Belgorod Regional Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov confirmed that the region had experienced its most significant strike of the war. No civilian casualties were reported, a detail that reflects Ukraine's consistent focus on precision targeting, rather than civilian harm. Gladkov acknowledged fires at utility facilities and predictably invoked what has become a familiar Russian explanation for structural damage: falling debris, a line we have heard many times before whenever Ukraine strikes with accuracy. A subsequent statement from Gladkov revealed the damage was more extensive than initially reported. Homes, vehicles, and infrastructure across multiple settlements, including Borisov, Valuisky, Volokhonovsky, Gryvoron, and Krasnoyarsk, sustained damage. Gas supplies were disrupted across several areas, a direct consequence of the Belgorod TPP's destruction. Ukraine offered no public comment on the strike, apparently allowing the results to speak for themselves. Weapons and strategic significance. The weapon used was almost certainly HIMARS, as Russian authorities themselves stated. This is consistent with Belgorod's geography. As a border region, it falls well within HIMARS' operational range. The Block 1A missiles compatible with the system can travel up to 300 kilometers and deliver a payload of 300 submunitions via a single-burst warhead. If ATACMS missiles were used instead, that would constitute indirect confirmation of U.S. authorization, given the approval mechanism established in spring 2025. A November ATACMS strike had already suggested that permission had been re-granted, and January 25th may represent another instance of that authorization. Russia's counterclaims. Russia's defense ministry, via TASS, responded as expected, claiming to have intercepted or destroyed most of what Ukraine fired, including 31 HIMARS rockets, 2 guided aerial bombs, and 68 fixed-wing drones, while making no mention of any successful Ukrainian strikes. The ministry also claimed 1,335 Ukrainian casualties. These claims are difficult to take seriously from an agency that also asserts Russia has destroyed 670 Ukrainian aircraft and 283 helicopters since the war began, numbers that exceed Ukraine's entire pre-war fleet several times over. Why Belgorod matters. Strikes on Belgorod carry strategic weight beyond the immediate damage inflicted. As was outlined by News Sky in October, Belgorod is a critical logistical artery for Russian military operations. Equipment deliveries and troop rotations into the Luhansk and Kharkiv regions pass through it. Power generation for frontline areas also flows through the region. Belgorod's 40-kilometer border with Ukraine makes it uniquely exposed, and Ukraine's long-range strike capabilities mean virtually no part of the oblast is out of reach. Hitting Belgorod achieves two things simultaneously: the destruction of genuine military and logistical infrastructure, and what has been described as shaking the rear of the Russian war machine. Putin's message to Ukraine is that its civilians are not safe. Ukraine's message back is that the same applies to Belgorod and the military apparatus it sustains. Russia's HIMARS competitor. One final development from January 25th. United Media reported that Russia has deployed a system it is calling a HIMARS killer, the Sarma multiple launch rocket system, presented as Russia's domestic equivalent to HIMARS. The catch is that Sarma appears to be derived from the 9A5T2-4, a prototype platform dating back 19 years that never entered production. Whether the system is operationally capable remains genuinely unclear. Ukraine will monitor its performance closely. In the meantime, the strike on Belgorod stands as the direct consequence of Putin's refusal to take Zelensky's September warning seriously. And it's worth noting that Ukraine's ability to execute strikes of this nature may owe a great deal to a sustained 2025 campaign by the Security Service of Ukraine's Alpha unit, a unit that, over the course of that year alone, inflicted an estimated $4 billion in damage to Russian air defense systems, opening protected aerial corridors in the process. More on that operation is available in our dedicated coverage. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribing ensures you won't miss our daily coverage of Ukraine's long-range strike operations inside Russian territory.